When it came to looking for somebody to talk about mentoring, I was reminded of a commercial that shows a kid who wants to know how to ask the girl in front of him out on a date. And instead of asking a friend or asking a parent, he asks Google. Google and Alexa are mentoring lots of our teenagers these days, as are television and internet programming. So what does it look like to get back to kind of an old school personal mentoring approach? Blair Bryan is a good friend of mine from Charlotte, North Carolina. I've known him longer than either one of us want to admit. Blair's father, like mine, was a minister. In fact, his dad was an evangelist who happened to graduate from George Pepperdine University back in 1946. Blair graduated from, I forget where, another Christian university somewhere. No, Blair is a graduate of Harding and became a successful businessman, served as an elder in the church there in Charlotte. But when he came to the second part of his life, he decided he would focus it on passing on wisdom in a couple of different ways. He is one of the board of trustees of the Heritage 21 Foundation. Did I get that right, Blair? Heritage 21 helps churches working through difficult times, helps churches to grow and find new paths forward. And he launched a project called the Barnabas Project. Spent the last 8 years of his life guiding this project that helps teach people how to mentor. In fact, it's a whole mentoring structure, a mentoring ministry for both young and older people, and has been used in colleges as well as churches and different places all across the country. He has spoken about mentoring here on our Crossways program. And by the way, if you've got a sophomore or junior in high school, we're going to give them one more week or two to apply to Crossways, 9 days at Pepperdine for $200. And no, you can't come for that rate. Sorry about that. But your sophomores and juniors can. You can look up Crossways, and I'll get Julia to put something in the chat line about where your students can check out that leadership program. So, Blair, we're talking about discipleship and mentoring today.
Yes.
In your mind, what's the difference?
Well, there are a lot of similarities. Both are very strategically important for kingdom work, I believe. Both should be outcome driven. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And both require the participant to have surrendering aspect to it. They approach it with surrendering. But there are some differences. I mean, the way they work hand in hand very well together. Discipleship is, Christ said to Peter and to Matthew and Andrew, he said, "Follow me." And then Paul says, "Imitate me as I imitate Christ." So it's kind of a binary following of someone when you're in discipleship, and it's really works incredibly well, in my personal opinion, with newer Christians. And it's an important component that we have to have of discipling Christians to becoming what does a Christian look like. But mentorship is really more specialized. It's more unique. How do you take certain gifts that someone has, fine-tune those, help them know how to utilize them for the glory of God? And so it's kind of a part two of after discipleship comes mentoring.
Okay, so in your mind, it's a step one of discipling, and mentoring may come in part of the ongoing development.
I think both are critically important.
Okay, all right.
And more importantly, I think they're strategically important to work hand in hand, because we are about the business of maturing people in their faith.
Yes.
And you need both components, I believe, to have actual true maturation. And I believe in the church, we have a lot of people that are in our fellowship who have been there for 30 years and they've never really matured. And I think that's on us as leaders. We need to be about how do we help people grow in regard to that. Well, let me
let you share then about the Barnabas Project, if you would, and about how that can work for our churches.
Sure. Okay. I worked in commercial real estate for about 25 years and had some success at that. And I look back on that and realized that so much of what I did because someone taught me. Someone took me underneath their wing, coached me, let me understand how you approach business in a certain way, how you become successful in business. And it was because somebody helped me through that process. And as I got little older, as Jeff mentioned, and decided I want to do something different in my life. I was just asking myself, how do I take what I learned in business and actually apply it to my second half of my life? Because in business, it wasn't just for my success that I needed mentoring, but also I had it as a cultural aspect of my entire business. It was who we were. It's how we approach things. It's how we continued to grow. It was how we continued to be successful in regard to that. So I said, if I want to take this, I need to figure out how do you do that in a Christian setting, and how do I apply these to kingdom work? As a result, I created this mentoring program to really do the following things. Number one, to help people gain greater clarity of their spiritual gifts and passions. And I think each of us have very unique ones, and most of us are not even aware of what they are or how to apply them for kingdom work. Secondly, to learn of what's God designed about these and what does he expect from us. And number three, how Satan will attempt to undercut your pursuit of successfully applying your gifts. Think about it this way. The last thing Satan wants for you to do is to understand what your gifts are and how you need to actually apply them and then become successful at it. So he's going to try to undercut that. And so how will he do that? That way you can recognize it and appreciate when it happens, when you see Satan in your life. And finally, how to create an execution strategy. I ran businesses. I know how to make that successful, and now I've applied it to also personal life and how to live out the life that I believe God's created you to be, specifically and uniquely. So over the last 8 years, we created the Barnabas Project, almost 9 years now. It's a mentoring program I've done it through colleges, I've done it through churches. I've done segments of it at different times for people, and regard to that, hundreds of people go through the program from ages 21 to 71 years old. So it's of all ages in regard to that. And then I think if you kind of look back on this and say, okay, what have you learned from doing it? Now you know what we do in this program for each individual, and each individual has a unique answer to what your gifts are, what your passions, and how they work together. But I kind of said, there are 5 things that I've kind of zeroed in on and said, if you have these 5 ingredients in a mentoring program, you increase your chance of success. And in a minute, I'm also going to share with you what I believe the 5 ingredients for potential failure are. So I would look out for these things of failure and lean into those things of success. Okay. The top 5 ingredients for a successful mentoring program, in Blair's humble opinion, is 1, keep it small. You know, we want to really scale things up a lot. And maybe that's us as Americans, maybe that's us as the way we think, and we try to think, okay, we make this as big as possible. But let me tell you, that intimacy of a small aspect is very, very critical. You know, doing this almost on a full-time basis, I max out at about 40 to 50 in a leverage model that I try to get as much out of it as I can. And it's just in these programs that I do or run almost a year, because you can't be in and out of it quickly. It's not a weekend kind of thing. It's because your people need to assimilate this information and take it on themselves and learn how to use it and learn how to lean into it and feel confident in it. And it changes their life through the process. And that takes time, and it's keeping small. And if thinking through this, if I were a church and I was trying to do this, I might have it's not a bad thing to say, like, I'm going to have 9 or 10 people in a group, and maybe I'll have 2 or 3 groups that start every year. But that's pretty much the capacity that you might want to do in a church setting, unless you had multiple mentors growing people through that process. Second thing that I would probably say is a great successful ingredient: encourage participants to start praying for a surrender mindset months in advance.
Wow, Blair, right before you get to that,
yes.
I want to make sure we all get it. When you talked about a group of 8 or 9, Are all of those mentees with one mentor, or is that a mix of mentees and mentors?
Yeah, it's interesting. In these small groups of 8 or 9 people or so, or 10 people, it's interesting to see how the Spirit works. And there's a secret sauce that seems to be added in that small group. And it might be that, and one person can't mentor more than that, in my opinion. And that would be stretching it. This is almost, because he has to be in the lives of each one of those people. You have to coach them through. There needs to be some kind of curriculum to go with that, I believe, that's purposeful. You see what I said, one of the key elements is that you're going for a future purpose with each person and helping them figure that out, but you really can't grow more than that and even coach it. And I think that's with one mentor. Now, I think that mentor needs to have probably some good training to figure out how to be a mentor and if they don't have a lot of detailed training experience in it, it's going to be a lot fewer than 8 or 9.
All right, go ahead. And principle number 2, I love praying for, you called it a surrender mindset. Why?
Yeah. Whether you're wanting to be a disciple of Christ or being mentored by someone else, you're going to have to learn how to let go of control. You're going to have to learn to say, God, take me wherever you want me to go, and I'm going to go there. I don't know where it is exactly. And that doesn't happen quickly. You have to, I think, pray for that over and over and over again. And through that process, you become that person that you want to be. And I think having the prayer of a surrender prayer is very important for all of us in our faith. And especially when you're hitting people and trying to say, we want you to be a different kind of person in the future than you are today. Okay. Third thing I would say is each participant should expect to receive a real defined outcome. It's not just hanging out together. It's not just showing up and, hey, what's going on in your life? But you're trying to have something come out of that is purposeful at the end of it. What I found in what we do with the Barnabas Project, this kind of process helps people actually in their career success even. And I mentioned that. I said, look, if you understand yourself better and what you're good at, how to apply it, how to measure your success, how to actually implement on it, you'll be so much successful in many areas of your life, including your career. But that's not the purpose of why we're doing this. We're called to do something much greater, and that's for kingdom work. And that's why I believe that God gave you these gifts and God gave you these passions. And if you only knew how to use them well and recognize what they are and how to apply them, great things will happen for the kingdom. Okay, fourth thing is sometimes I'll do larger group sessions, sometimes smaller group sessions, and individual coaching. You can't just have a large group session, even if it's 20 people. I think that's a large group. That would be, you can't just do that. You're not looking for throughput here. You're looking for various intimacies. And I've found that by having different types of group settings helps the dialogue change and people learn through those processes. Fifth thing I would say is an ingredient for a successful mentoring program is continual sharing by the participants of what their learnings are, of what their personal experiences has been in the program while they've been in it. And also what's the results for them in their life. That aspect of them giving their personal testimony makes it real for them. And then they feel confident in it. And that sharing of it helps them to know not only, I think that's part of sharing our faith, actually, to understand how to share your testimony, even on things like this.
So Blair, would that sharing typically take place, the one you just talked about, in the small group or in the large group setting? And how often do you do large and small groups? I'm thinking logistics here.
Yeah. So the program I do is a 10-month program. We have 3 large group sessions where everybody's together, and there may be, let's call it 20 people in that large group. We always do it then. And it's probably maybe 20% of the time, it's a key element of that larger group session. But even in the smaller groups or in the individual coaching, every time that's how we start the session. I'll say, okay, Joe, what have you learned in the last week? What do you think God's speaking to you about this program? How do you feel like how you're feeling about your strengths today? And are you leaning into them? Or are you still fighting? And so I want them to talk. It's very important that they're the ones giving their testimony about this. And every single time we're together, we talk about it because I want them to actually verbalize it.
Yeah. So
it's
I'm
an
hearing that
educational process.
you've got an individual phase of it, or an individual piece of it, and then you've got the group of 7, 8, 9 students.
Yes.
And then you've got the 20 that get together. I think you said monthly. Is that right?
No, they're actually, we do it about once every 3 months.
Okay. All right. So over the 10-month period, that large group only meets maybe three times. Okay. All right. And when someone engages in this, you talk about your skills a lot. Before you get to the list of 5 bad newses,
yes.
What tool do you use to help identify skills in Barnabas?
Okay, so we each have our, so I lean into strength finders. Everybody, let me tell you, the publisher for strength finders loves me. I think in the last 8 years, I have personally bought, this is an interesting question. I haven't thought about this. I've probably bought around 1,500 to 2,000 of these books and given them out. I believe in it. I believe that they help us define. And I think of those strengths like tools in your toolbox. Each of us have a different set of tools.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us don't even know exactly what's in our toolbox or how to use the tools. And so that's what we're teaching.
Yep. It's interesting, Blair, without us talking about this, I remember when I found out that you guys use Clifton Strength Finder, because that's what we use at Crossways. One of the reasons is because it focuses on these positive, clear tools, and not just saying, oh, you're an extrovert or you're an introvert, which, those things can be helpful to know. For those of you looking for it, it's called the Clifton Strengths Finder, and has both online, of course, as well as print versions. All right, Blair, tell us about the 5 ways that we can run our truck into the wall.
Okay, good point. I'll try to run through these pretty fast for the timing here. First one, if you fail to share high expectations when selling the program or initiative. Honestly, I think in our churches, we dumb down too much. We try to make it as easy as possible just to get them in the door, and then hope that great things will happen later. And the reality is, God demands a lot from us if we really want to be a disciple of Christ, then we need to step up our game, and we need to expect others to step up their game. And so I think I think you set high expectations of what is expected of us as men and women of God as the first thing. And then they also, and I'll tell them this, when they're in a program with me, not only do we expect a lot out of you within this program and a commitment, but also you should expect a lot out of us. And so there's a mutual commitment made to join the program. Second one is if you spend a minimal time and effort in recruiting and ensuring that participants fully understand the program before starting it. Okay, so I'm going to give you some interesting numbers here. I average, before I start a group of, let's say, 10 people, I will probably spend 3 hours with each person individually before we start the program. And then I'll rehash everything again when we're together first time as a group again, because I want to make them understand where we're going, how we're going to get there, and what's demanded of them and what they should expect from me. And so I spend a lot of time making sure they know where we're going instead of, and I think that's an important issue, to make sure that there's a point of commitment. Third one is that it's very difficult to have a great mentoring program unless the mentor is really passionate and there's ownership of the initiative. It's very common for a program not to succeed when there's nobody there that's really championing it. And I think we need champions of this. In particular, I was trying to estimate this. In 2020, I probably spent somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 hours on this particular aspect in the year. Wow. Think about that. It can, if you really want to do it well, it can consume you because you're spending a lot of time with people. you're coaching them, you're part of their lives, and
Yep.
so you've got to be willing to do that. And so that's kind of what I do. And and so I'm not sure how you could do it without the mentor really owning it and championing it along the way.
Well,
Number
let me
four,
just say,
yes,
I'm doing the math in my head of 9 students and 3 hours each, and you haven't started the program yet.
right.
You
Yes.
have got to have somebody who believes how important this is to invest that much time in
Yes,
it.
and I will spend, and here's the thing, I'll have like 3 groups start each year. So I'll have multiple groups starting throughout their year. They're just staged and rolling. And so there's always one that's starting, there's always one in the middle, and there's always one that's ending. And I'm constantly rolling through that to do that. And so it's my way of applying manufacturing concepts, I guess, in a way, but it takes a lot of time. It's not a very and that's part of, I think, the intimacy of discipleship or mentoring, is that it's it just takes time, and you can never get away from that. Okay, the fourth one, leaders that don't continually and consistently follow up in person with phone calls, FaceTime meetings, whatever, throughout the duration. I think that's really critically important, as you can tell from what I've said already. And then lastly, I would say, whether it's the parent organization or a church, if they're not fully embracing it as a strategic process integral to their organization, it's probably going to fail. It's hard, even if you have somebody that's a great champion out there, and you have a lot of demand and interest for it, let's say. But I think if the parent organization is not backing it and understand how it fits into their strategy, I think it would be very difficult. So I think that's an important one. The last thing, and then I'll turn it over if there are any questions.
And,
I was
and
thinking
let me
about
say,
this.
Blair, if I
Yes.
can,
Yeah.
guys and gals, I failed to say, use the chat line. Most of you have been here before and know it. Please drop your questions in the chat line, and we'll run some of those by Blair once he finishes.
Sure. But let me finish out with one thing here, Jeff. I think that might be
Please.
also helpful as they're maybe chiming in with their questions. I'm a business guy. I did that for 25 years. I ran commercial real estate companies, and so I lean into those learnings that I had in life. And there's a guy by the name of Peter Drucker. He's known as actually a Southern California guy, known as the father of modern management. And if you're in the last 50 or 60 years, you studied, and you were in business, you studied Peter Drucker, because he's the guru of how do you run an organization. And he said that if you have more than 5 focus areas within your organization, then you have none at all. Wow. I realize that most of our churches attempt to have 10 or 15 areas that we all try to do. And many times we don't do any of them really well. And so I think it's important to simplify, perhaps, as much as possible. I think it's important for any organization and as a guy who's run a lot of organizations, to have 3 or 5 things that you really say, these are our focus areas, and this is what we're going to kill it on. And that's where you spend most of your money. That's where you spend most of your time. That's what you focus on. And I think the culture of discipleship and mentorship needs to be one of those focus areas, because I think this is how we grow as an organization. And it doesn't really cost you a lot of money, but it does cost you a lot of time. I will say that. And I think I can't imagine anything, frankly, that would have a better return on investment for God's kingdom than mentoring and discipleship.
Amen. Amen. Well, Blair, there's questions bubbling up inside my head here. I'm gonna give you one just to get you ready to go, and that is, if you were an elder at a church right now and said, we just have got to get this mentoring program going, what are the first 2 things that you would do right out of the box?
One, I would try to say, what are we trying to achieve with this? I told you what my purpose is. And by the way, if anybody wants to have a copy of our program, I will share it with anyone. there's no cost to it. That's not the purpose of it. We're here to try to grow the kingdom. And so whatever I have, a lot of it I borrowed from other people anyway, and with their blessing. And so I've got to do the same for others. And so whatever I have is yours. But I think kind of say, what do we want to achieve with this? And how do I get some curriculum around that to make sure there's a little bit of structure to it? And then I would have a champion. Who is my first champion? And I would focus on that, and then start small and grow it up from that. Hopefully you'll have multiple champions, but you want to really start with one and test it out and model it out for everybody else.
Well, I've already seen one question. Is there a website where you've put any of these things up, or this all something we'd get via email and such?
You know what? It's sorry, I'm not probably as good on that as I should be. But if you guys have my there at Pepperdine have my email. Anybody
We're going to put your email address in the chat line.
I'll send you a book and let you kind of our workbook that we use. It's the book of tools to help people through coach them through the process of this 10-month program. And I'll be glad to share it with whoever would like it. So,
well, fantastic.
No strings attached, no cost.
Get you to share one with us so that we can make that resource and contacts for you available as well. All right. I don't know if it's Tammy or Julia. Are there some questions in the chat line that we can have Blair address?
Thank you, Blair, this is Tammy. Thank you, Blair, for handling this topic. This is great. I've been taking notes, and then I remember, I'm supposed to be watching the chat too. There aren't any direct questions that I see there, but there was, a comment by David Clark. I've heard the long list of ministries as a Cheesecake Factory menu, going back to you have no more than 5 things. So. And then Michael Wexler says, love the quote by Peter Drucker. Thanks for sharing, Blair. I think you're right on with that. I think we often try to overcomplicate our processes and be all things to all people rather than focusing on the certain key aspects. Great stuff.
You know what? Tammy. I think, hey, Tammy, one thing that's it's as simple. What I'm talking about here is what Christ did. What you're getting ready to hear about discipleship, I'm sure when Raphael's getting ready to talk here in a minute, he's all geared up there. I'm looking at him, and what we're talking about are very simple things here. That it's going back to exactly what Christ did and how he approached it, and whether and how do you make people become the way God wants them to be. And I think it takes that intimacy, and it's truly a throwback.
Well, and Blair, one of the challenges, I spent too many years working as a preacher and leader in churches. Mentoring is not a ministry that carries a lot of sizzle and splash. It's not the kind of, we're going to, good things, we're going to have a ministry fair. We're going to do this thing for a school, or to feed the homeless, or we're going to have a VBS. None of those are bad deals, but mentoring is by its very nature personal and private. Are there any ways that you have seen to help kind of give that picture to the church of the blessing of ministry, of mentoring rather? Any suggestions for that? Okay,
so a couple of things is, one, what I found out, so I mentioned I've dealt with people from 21 to 71 years old in this program. It's interesting to me, I think there's kind of 3 groups of people. There are people that are right at that period of when they're coming out of college and they're trying to figure out what life looks like out of it. That once again, that's a transition period. There's another transition period that happens when people are in their 30s, and all of a sudden maybe they're married, they got a mortgage for the first time, they're really into their career, and all of a sudden they go, what just happened to my life? And then there's people that are old like you, Jeff, and that are saying, what's going to happen the next stage of my life? And I'm trying to figure out what that's going to look like. And believe me, I'm definitely there, trying to understand that. And so you catch people in these transition periods. That's when they're most open to change, and they're seeking it. And so you sit there and say, let me help you go through that process. Let me help you understand what God wants you to be. This is and so I found that especially the 30-year-olds, man, they're just all over this. they just love it. They can't get enough of it because they're overwhelmed right now.
Mhm.
I think that the next group that probably is my age, because we all of a sudden say, wait a minute, I'm dealing with, parents that are sick or dying. I'm dealing with grandkids now for the first time. I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened in my life? Am I going to end well or not with my life? And it's really, I need to think about this some more. And so those two groups, especially, it seems like, are very open for this because
Yes.
they're seeking it right now. So I'm telling you, this is easier to sell than we think it is.
Mm.
There's a hunger and demand for this that people have that's innate in us right now.
Yep.
Especially if you get
You
into
do
these
talk like a
transitions.
business guy. You're not selling, you're giving away here. This is a
That's
gift.
right.
But that idea of catching folks at what some call the seam time
Yes.
in their life, when they're moving from one place, one piece, one chapter to another. We actually had somebody reach out and ask if they could use our life map. We do this same kind of thing at Crossways, and it was a seniors group. And I'm thinking, okay, now these 16-year-olds are drawing this nice long map of their life. You got a pretty short map there. But now that I'm in my mid 60s, I'm like, no, I've got plenty of map to go. And these are the folks with the wisdom, with the energy, sometimes with the resources to be huge blessings.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep. I think we have one question or two. Tammy, was there a question?
Yes. Josh Parrish, who is one of the ministers in the Bay Area, says, "Hi, Blair. Discipleship is and has been a core focus of my ministry for a long time. In my experience, the time for each person varies. Can you speak to how you use those 10 months? What do you do with someone who needs more time than that? And what is the ultimate goal for that person at the end of 10 months?
Okay, so as I said, at the end of the 10 months, what my objective with each person that goes through, and some seem to get it a little earlier, and some it takes a little longer, I agree with you, is that I want them to understand what gifts they have and what passions they've been given, and understand there's a uniqueness in that design. I want them to understand, in particular, I know this seems maybe, we'll probably spend a half the time just talking about how Satan's going to disrupt you. Because I want to give the warning signs. I want them to recognize them and appreciate them. And frankly, most of these are things that I've struggled with to deal with, and how Satan's going to try to disrupt that. And then finally, that they have this execution plan, which will actually, each one, to figure out how to write a personal mission statement, or what your focus areas are going to be in your personal life, and to actually, how are you going to measure that and define that, and how you go through this, and how to make this. I look at this as a discipline of life. I go through mine annually and revise it annually. And if anything big happens in my life, about 6 years ago, I had a heart attack, and I said, oh, I've got to get out my game plan and figure out what I need to do differently going forward, because this is kind of anything big happens in my life, this is a wake-up call, and I revise it. And so I'm trying to teach that same discipline to every person that comes through. That way you stay on point, because there's so many distractions in life. We tend to lose our focus of life, of what we were created to be. And so at the end of that 10 month or 11 months or 9 months, I want them to have all those things and hopefully be instilled as a discipline for them, so that they can continue to use it over and over and over again.
Well, Blair, I am so grateful for the things you've shared, and especially for your graciousness in saying, hey, I'll share the Barnabas Project with you. Two questions. One, are you doing Zoom groups in Barnabas right now? If somebody said, man, I'd like to be part of one of your groups, or are you only doing live groups at this point?
Well, we actually just finished up a group that just finished, and we decided, when we saw how COVID was disrupting us about last fall, we decided we did not start a group last fall intentionally to let's get past COVID, because it was frankly, it was just a strain. It was difficult. So we said,
sure.
We were doing Zoom before that, but we were still doing the face-to-face meetings as well. And so it was just, we decided take a little break, and then start it back up when everything starts relaxing, hopefully a little bit.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. And We'll put Blair's contact information in the, as far as his email, in the chat line for everybody. And Blair, if you'll shoot, let me ask you personally to shoot us a copy of the Barnabas Project. We'd love to be able to both talk about it, point people towards you, and share it with others. Thank you for the way you have impacted lots of lives. Mine.